Hey everybody, welcome back. In this video, I want to talk a little bit about FABs, which are like a foundational approach to sales. And normally you would maybe do this like later on in a sales class as we're going through the sales process. But I think of FABs and the process of putting together these FAB statements as like really foundational to thinking through the basics of what an approach to sales should look like. And that is something that's incredibly customer centric, something that's really, really focused on, okay, how do I communicate to my customer at the end of the day exactly how he or she is going to benefit from what it is that I have to provide? So getting started, FABs, it's an acronym for features, advantages, and benefits. And what you do is you think through, okay, what's a feature in this case? A feature is some characteristic of the product, right? So my kind of like in my back pocket example here is anytime you think about buying like a new tech product, how do we tend to see tech products presented, particularly like side by side, right? It's a lot of just listing out the tech specs. So how many gigs of RAM do you have? What kind of screen resolution is it running? What software does it have access to or not have access to? If we're talking about, like gaming, are there exclusive releases? Those kinds of things. So we're talking like basic facts of a product. What colors does it come in? That kind of information is what we're referring to when we use the word feature. An advantage is pushing on that a little bit more. And that's the way that I tend to talk about putting these statements together, is like pushing on it. When I say pushing on it, I mean, okay, let's take that concept and let's push a little bit and get closer and closer and closer to the lived experience of the person who we're talking to, the lived experience of the person who we're trying to convince that what it is we have to sell is going to improve their experience going through this world. It's going to improve their life at the end of the day. So advantage, when we say advantage, thinking back to the feature, thinking back to the basic facts of the product that we have for sale, what does that feature do? How does that feature translate into something that matters? How does the feature work? Okay, so how many gigs of RAM are there in, the phone or the PC that I'm looking at, or the gaming console, whatever it might be? Like what is RAM? Explain to the customer, what is RAM? What does that mean? How does that work? And then pushing one step further, what we're trying to build towards here is a really clear benefit. So then pushing on the, okay, how does the feature work? Why? Why should your customer care? Okay, it has this many gigs of RAM. RAM is going to make it operate faster. Why do I care if my computer operates a little bit faster? Well, it's going to make my work life a little bit more seamless, right? I'm going to spend more time writing or creating or interpreting my analyses, the stuff that really matters, doing the work that I as a human find rewarding, and less time sitting here going, sure would be nice if my computer would finish running that model. So why should your customer care? And that's really particular to the specific customer that you're talking about or talking to in that moment. Another way of thinking about this is thinking through, how does that specific benefit fulfill your customer's need? And you want those needs usually, we'll get into the details of this and like matching it up with your product, but particularly in, better compensated sales positions or B2B sales positions, you need to think pretty abstractly about the needs of your customer and really, really push to take the perspective to empathize with the day-to-day experience of the person who you're trying to sell to, in thinking through how do the features of your product translate into advantages, translate into benefits in the life of the customer who you're working with. So let's go through a couple of examples here. Go ahead and turn these off. And okay, so once again, we have features, characteristics, we have advantages, the what or the how, exactly what do those features and how do those features kind of manifest, and then finally benefits. So why should your customer care? How is it going to improve your customer's life? And one set of examples we can run through is something as simple as like, okay, It has stainless steel parts, whatever it is, right? We can just think really abstractly for this first example. It has stainless steel parts. Well, what do we tend to think about something that has stainless steel as opposed to plastic or ceramic or some kind of composite parts? What are our associations with stainless steel? We think stainless steel is probably going to last longer than those other things. We think that there's, some higher quality, some durability associated with being made from stainless steel. And how does that translate into a direct benefit for your customer? Well, it means time saved from having to deal with things breaking. It means you have a more seamless work experience, right? So there's one just like really abstract example. I wanted to do something like that at least I had spent some time thinking about over the last year, and that is like, where did TikTok come from and how have they taken over and become so insanely compelling and successful? Like, what is it that they're really doing differently, right? Because we had short form video apps before, and we have video apps or apps that have integrated video or services that have been based on video from the very beginning with much, much larger user bases. Google and YouTube have been around for over a decade now, and Google's been experimenting with some short form video formats that are tailored to phones. Instagram has a much larger user base and has been around for a while. So what did TikTok bring to the table that made them so successful? I mean, the real answer here seems to be the algorithm, which is related to how some of their deals keep getting blown up and whether or not that algorithm is for sale as part of the platform. But let's talk about some other features of the app. So one is that TikTok offers really extensive, but also incredibly intuitive, incredibly easy to use video editing features. Okay, well, what does that mean for, in this case, I'm treating kind of like users of the app and not so much specific creators on the app. How does that translate to benefit for users? That's an important distinction. We'll talk about that more when we get into thinking through software sales. But for now, let's treat users as our target customers here. What does having extensive and intuitive video editing features mean for just users who aren't even that incredibly focused on creating content themselves? Well, what that means is higher quality content, but from really niche creators. So people who know what they're talking about or are influential or at least really well versed in very small, very specific communities can create really high content or high quality content on TikTok because those video editing features are so easy to use, so intuitive. Okay, well, pushing on that just a little bit more, what does that mean for users? Why should I, if I'm, stuck sitting on a bus or just have 3 minutes to kill, why am I going to open TikTok and not open Instagram? Why am I going to while I'm eating my lunch, open TikTok and flip through that for a couple of minutes instead of pulling up YouTube? Well, if all I'm looking for is just something to distract me for a few minutes and give me a burst of positive emotion, I just want a little bit of dopamine, TikTok is a more reliable source of that, particularly once that algorithm gets dialed in, right? It's incredibly effective. So pushing on this from a user perspective, someone who's not even using those video editing features, what does the fact that they have really well developed, really intuitive, really approachable video editing mean for someone who's just going to be consuming content on the app? Well, it means that you're going to have a more reliable source of something that's probably pretty specific and well matched to your interests, but also relatively high quality. All right, let's do one more TikTok focused one. So another thing that TikTok does relatively well compared to its competitors, some of its competitors, is that it's very easy to collaborate, right? It's very easy to take a video that someone else posted and adapt the sound from it, stitch it, duet it. That's really central to the way that TikTok approaches video. And how does that translate to someone who's just, again, consuming, not necessarily creating on the app? Well, it gives you some opportunity to develop community or social connections. And I think that this is more obvious, right? If you're thinking from a creator perspective, someone who's actually looking at something and saying, oh, how can I play off of that and create my own content? But if you're just consuming, even seeing other people kind of forming those connections and feeling like you're a part of it because it's showing up in your feed, that starts to make you feel like you're a part of something, like you're watching connections happen. And what that does is it fulfills a social need. It fulfills a social need, and we get some additional benefit, some additional sense of being able to have a shared experience with people, despite the fact that we're not actually in person. And I've thought a lot about this because one of the papers that I put together for my dissertation was looking at the kinds of benefits that people get to their well-being from engaging in hyped media events. So, like the Super Bowl, the Academy Awards, the Kentucky Derby. People who don't watch football or really care about movies or care about horse racing watch those events, do something, and when they do that, they're doing something other than what they would typically do, right? If I don't usually watch football games on Sunday, and all of a sudden, because it happens to be the Super Bowl, I watch a football game instead of what I normally think is the best use of my time on Sunday, like, is that just completely irrational? Or is there some benefit that comes from that? That was the question of the research paper. And one of the things we found in that research is that, weirdly, even if you are alone, even if you are not watching with other people, engaging with these hyped, these like culturally shared touch points gives you some sense of social connection, and you feel like you are getting some benefits to the social components of your well-being as a result of engaging with those. I don't have data to test this, but I think that we get probably a similar effect when we think about TikTok and the fact that TikTok makes it very easy to make even small community things feel shared, feel like communal experiences, that we're probably able to derive some social benefit from that, which is really interesting, right? If you think about the explosion in the popularity of TikTok early on in the pandemic, when we otherwise were lacking in a lot of opportunities to develop social connections, to have genuinely like physically meet space, right? Shared experiences. This app was better at giving people some opportunities to do things together. So there we go. There's a couple of TikTok examples. And then an interesting and important thing to keep in mind with all of these is that we just went through some like kind of traditional product sales stuff here, right? But we can do the exact same FAB exercise when we're talking about our personal branding, our personal positioning, kind of putting together the way that we present ourselves personally. And when I say personal branding, I don't mean like trying to be some kind of influencer. I mean like really thinking critically when you're writing a cover letter, or developing your LinkedIn or developing your resume, thinking through how to write those things in a really compelling way. Because what are you doing in that circumstance, right? You're selling yourself and your skill set and your ability to fill some need that a company has. Or if you're an entrepreneur, you're selling your idea, your ability to manage and scale this business that you're developing to investors or to possible customers. And what you need to do there is you need to think through the features and how those translate to advantages of yourself, of your skill set, and then how that translates even further into a benefit for the person who you're asking to purchase from you, invest in you, buy from you. I said purchase from you. I meant hire. Hire from you, invest in you, purchase from you. So if I do one just for myself here, right? Okay. Like the very basic thing at the top of any resume, or in academia, we call them CVs. But the top of anything that I put together is going to say Erin Percival Carter, PhD. Like, what is the benefit of me having a PhD if I'm talking to someone for a potential consulting opportunity? Why should they bother to hire someone with a PhD instead of someone without a PhD? Well, if someone's coming to me, then they probably want some behavioral science informed recommendations, right? That's what I'm going to be uniquely good at. So what does the feature of me having a PhD translate to? Well, it means that I have a better ability to interpret the current state of the scientific literature than someone else. There are lots of people out there who say they're behavioral scientists or behavioral economists or marketing consultants of some other type that use the things that we've developed in behavioral science over time. What does working with someone who actually has a PhD get you? it gets you someone who actually understands that literature in a much deeper fashion. That's an advantage for me, really, right? Still kind of building on my skills here. And how does that translate to a benefit, a direct benefit to someone who might hire me for consulting work? Well, it means that I'm going to be much better positioned to know whether or not a recommendation that I make needs to be tested more extensively before rollout, and kind of how extensively it needs to be tested before rollout. So when we report findings in the literature, we cite other papers, but it's often not really clear exactly how many other demonstrations of similar effects do we have, right? Scientific literature needs to build on itself over time. So if you are a scientist and really familiar with the literature, you probably have an idea of, okay, 15 papers in the last 5 years have shown this from competing labs, and it seems to be an incredibly consistent effect. So I think we do, a small beta test to make sure that taking this recommendation, taking this finding and applying it in our new context is going to behave about the way we expect, but relatively confident in the recommendation that I'm making, as opposed to some I don't know, there's something there, but there seem to be moderators. We don't have a good hold on them yet. We really should do a more extensive test, and maybe we should test with 3 different versions and see which of those versions is going to work best for your needs. That kind of knowledge that comes with being a PhD, being able to both know the state of the literature and go that extra step in terms of thinking through how extensively do we need to test this before we fully roll out some kind of change to our business practices. That's how that translates. Pushing on that even further, right? So when I work on U1 with one and developing some of these, or as we're talking in the in-person section of the class, if that is the case for this particular class watching this video, pushing on that a little bit further. I'm going to say that over and over and over again. You're going to be incredibly tired of hearing it. I'm going to be tired of saying it, but pushing on that a little bit further. What does that mean? That means we're increasing the likelihood of success, of actually getting the behavior that we would like to get as a result of whatever we're changing. Pushing on that a little bit further. What does that mean? Probably increases to profitability. Probably, if I'm talking to someone who's thinking through how to manage their marketing budget, and the thing that they're going to be held accountable for is the return on that budget, I'm going to tell that person, look, I'm going to help you get the best return possible on your marketing research budget, on your market development budget. Thinking through what is the thing that is going to be most motivating to your consumer, and how do you go from feature, from fact of the matter, to advantage that feature provides, to benefit at the end of the day to the specific customer that you are talking to. So these FAB statements, they seem really, really easy, but getting good at writing FAB statements is incredibly powerful, and you're about to get a lot of practice at it. Thanks, guys.